Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak in reply to the Chief Minister's report. Madam Speaker, we know that Territorians are fed up with antisocial and criminal behaviour in our community, and we believe it's fair enough because enough is enough. Territory Labor is in agreement that we, of course, need to see consequences for criminal behaviour and antisocial behaviour across the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker. And that's why, when Labor was in government, Madam Speaker, we toughened up bail laws and invested in record funding when it comes to our police, so that we had the resources across the Territory to ensure that we could tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. Madam Speaker, what we will never forget, and this is something that we actually don't even hear from the new CLP government, is that what they have promised to do is to prevent crime in the first place. We don't see or hear any of these processes, policies or programs presented by the CLP now that they are in government. Madam Speaker, we hear no solutions from the CLP about how they're going to stop reoffending behaviour or to ensure that Territorians who fall off the right track get back on the right track, and those who come into contact with the criminal justice system are supported to be stepping out of the criminal justice system. Madam Speaker, consecutive police commissioners of the Northern Territory have all said that we cannot arrest our way out of crime. This was echoed by the Northern Territory Coroner Elizabeth Armitage this week when she handed down her findings into the tragic domestic violence deaths of 4 Territory women. Madam Speaker, we need consequences for criminal behaviour, absolutely, but we need to hear what the solutions are from the CLP government. Still crickets. Madam Speaker, simply building more prisons or wanting people and locking up 10 and 11-year-old children is not going to make our communities safer in the long run. We need to focus on criminal behaviour and stopping and reducing that behaviour. We already know, Madam Speaker, the Northern Territory has the highest incarceration rates in the country, and evidence shows that imprisoning young children leads them down to a life of further crime, Madam Speaker. All of the evidence, we know the CLP don't like evidence, we know they don't like listening to the experts, we know that they definitely don't believe in data and statistics anymore. Apparently yesterday the member for Port Darwin said, oh, you can use them any way you want. So we know that they're not going to rely on the data, the evidence, statistics and the expertise of people in the field, but we will still call on them to do that, Madam Speaker, to listen to all the evidence, because we know that evidence, not just across the Territory, not just across Australia, but across the world, Madam Speaker, tells us that if the earlier a child comes into contact with the criminal justice system, the more prolonged their involvement will be, likely to reoffend again and stay in a pathway and a life of crime, Madam Speaker. When a child aged 10 or 11 years old in the Territory is sent to prison, who is exposed to prison cell for the first time, we collectively are putting them on a path to further offending and setting them up to fail, Madam Speaker. It is likely that we have already been failed by adults. It is likely these children have already been failed by the adults in their lives or in their communities, by the education system, by the child protection system, and it is unlikely that they will receive a full range of wraparound therapeutic treatment when they need to overcome the trauma of their early experiences and get them back on track under the CLP government, because they have now merged adult corrections and youth corrections together, Madam Speaker. Oh, and don't forget the little change that the CLP snuck in late last night to remove in the sessional orders the need for a human rights compatibility statement for Territory legislation to come through the 15th Legislative Assembly. This is a procedural manual, Madam Speaker, for the whole of the Northern Territory Parliament, not just for the government. This is for all of us. The procedural manual of the sessional orders provides us with the process of the Northern Territory Parliament. And the CLP, without notice, snuck it in, removed it, just a little, oh, yep, nothing to see here. But they have not committed, Madam Speaker, several hours since that happened, that's over 12 hours ago now, they have not committed to ensuring that through their own government cabinet processes, that they will still provide a statement that shows human rights compatibility for any legislation they draft, for any processes they choose to go through with their legislative schedule. They have not come out and said anything, Madam Speaker, and this surely is a big concern.
Please take your seat, Leader of the Opposition. Member for Goyder, what's your point of order?
Point of order, Madam Speaker. Standing Order 28 and 29, reference to other debate and reflection on previous votes.
I'm reasonably sure that that's reflection on previous debates within the day of the sittings. Is that correct? Oh, for the sessions. Okay. So perhaps you could clarify which debates you're talking about, Member for Goyder.
Referring to the motion relating to sessional orders yesterday evening.
Look, I think I'll allow a little bit of latitude here, as long as you've concluded those comments in relation to the sessional orders, or perhaps you could conclude promptly and move on. The member for Goyder is correct. Speaker. You're not meant to necessarily reflect on debates that have already concluded. Thrashing them out unnecessarily is not a good use of parliamentary time, but if you could move on to new points.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good way for the member for Goyder to waste 2 minutes of my time speaking, so I will continue on, Madam Speaker. But the sessional order has been removed. It doesn't exist. There are no human rights compatibility statement now required by the 15th Legislative Assembly, not just for the government, but for the whole of Parliament. That's a huge concern.
Look,
Madam Speaker, we know that the CLP...
Take your seat, please, Leader of the Opposition. I think that you need to move on, and I think this is the probably the point that the Leader of Government Business is making.
This is Standing Order 35, Madam Speaker, relevance to subject. This is a ministerial report on crime. It has nothing to do with the sessional orders that were debated last night.
Okay, we're not going to debate this across the chamber. I take the point that the member for Goyder has made. Your reference to a previous debate, please don't go there, and I think you need to keep this relevant to the ministerial statement that's being debated now. Please, Leader of the Opposition, you have the call.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We know the CLP has a very difficult time with accepting scientific evidence, but medical and psychological experts are absolutely clear, Madam Speaker, that the neurological development of a child's brain at the age that they are considered a child cannot be fully appreciated when it comes to the nature of their actions. They need care, support and not punishment when it comes to ensuring that they stay on the right track, Madam Speaker. We know that every time a child comes into contact with the criminal justice system, they are more likely to come in contact with the justice system time and time again. Almost 3/4 of people in the Northern Territory, Madam Speaker, in our prisons have been there before. How does this possibly make our community safer, Madam Speaker, when we talk about putting 10 and 11-year-old children on that pathway? Territorians absolutely have the right to be safe, Madam Speaker. We accept that, we endorse that, and we will advocate for that. We hear that loud and clear from our community, that safety is a concern right across the Territory, not just for our Darwin and urban members, Madam Speaker, for our mob in the bush as well. Lowering the age of criminal responsibility is not the answer to this, though, Madam Speaker, because the evidence tells us it is not the answer. Not just Labor and whatever you call us and rubbishing the things that we've done previously for the 8 years, but because evidence, experts, legal experts tell us it is not the way to go, Madam Speaker. We do not want to see children held accountable for... we do want to see children and young people held accountable for bad behaviour, Madam Speaker. We absolutely do. But when it comes to being supported on a better pathway, what has the CLP laid out for our kids who get into trouble? Oh, nothing. That's right. You've got nothing to say, Madam Speaker. They have nothing to say. They are not making a contribution to making our community safer. They are ignoring it and they're holding their heads down in shame. Madam Speaker, this talks to the true nature of the CLP. They are not looking at supporting the Territory in the long run. They're just wanting to make sure that in the next few months and the next few years, they can tick off the boxes of things they said that they would do. They are not looking for the future of the Territory and the betterment of the Territory in the long run, because we know that that actually requires hard work, Madam Speaker. It means that early identification, Madam Speaker, of children who require and need intensive management alongside the support of their families or their carers. Not all kids have the nuclear family that some people in this chamber may be privy to, but we make sure that the investment in early intervention, prevention and diversion programs, Madam Speaker, again, something that the CLP clearly lack. I don't want to listen to the evidence of the experts, but they clearly lack the will to deliver and to implement, Madam Speaker. By ignoring all of the research and evidence, the CLP are choosing to increase the cycle of youth crime, Madam Speaker. They are creating career criminals rather than ensuring children and young people who fall off the right track, that they do have the tools they need to change their behaviour, to face consequences, absolutely, but to change their behaviour, Madam Speaker. There is a range of programs, family supports and family engagement approaches that are aimed at teaching children about consequences and putting measures in place to change their behaviour. We would love to see, the Territory Labor Opposition would love to see the CLP actually invest in this area, Madam Speaker, and we will support them when they do that. But there's been nothing since they've come to government that shows they want to invest and to build capacity in this area. For example, Madam Speaker, our former Labor government invested $5 million in the new On the Right Track program to deliver intensive family support services, keeping children engaged in school and connecting families with mental health and alcohol and other drugs and parenting programs. We are hearing worrying reports that the CLP has scrapped funding to this program and other justice programs. They say they don't want to lock up 10, 11-year-old kids, Madam Speaker. We heard that from the member for Karama just before, but yet they are actively removing already, quietly in the background, these alternatives that will make a difference in the long run. I would love to hear more about that. Please correct me. I'd be happy to say that I'm wrong. Please, please, please correct me, CLP government. I will again go through the list of organisations, Madam Speaker, who have stood up and said quite loudly to the CLP government that they absolutely do not support children being put in prison. Victims of Crime Northern Territory, Aboriginal Peak Organisation of the Northern Territory, APONT, Legal Aid NT, Danila Dilba, Congress Aboriginal Health Service, Tungunjia Aboriginal Council, Save the Children, Northern Territory COS, and the Jesuit Social Services. It's just a few, and the list goes on, Madam Speaker. The real solution is to prevent crime before it happens through programs that divert young people from bad behaviour to offer them better alternatives. What we also need to see from the CLP government, Madam Speaker, is long-term solutions that turns people's lives around and gets them on a better path. That means implementing enforced consequences for offenders that changes their behaviour rather than further criminalising it. Increasingly punitive headline-grabbing laws without corresponding measures that actually stop people turning to crime or stop them from reoffending to make sure that our communities are safer. Our former Labor government delivered record investment in programs both in prison and the community to help break the cycle of reoffending. The Alternatives to Custody Life Skills Camp in Alice Springs has been highly successful, Madam Speaker, in turning around the lives of women caught up in the justice system through intensive support and tailored rehabilitation. The data, the statistics, maybe the CLP don't care, but they speak for themselves. Please go and read them. 4 out of 5 women, Madam Speaker, going through this program in Central Australia do not reoffend. You won't hear the CLP talking about this because they aren't interested in those real solutions. They have a different narrative rather than being able to look at both sides. Alternative to Custody facility in Alice Springs and in Groote Eylandt, Madam Speaker, providing culturally appropriate community-led solutions to breaking the cycle of crime. These are the things that are going to make our communities safer in the long run. The CLP has not committed to expanding and supporting these programs whilst they've been in government already. Madam Speaker, when Labor was in government, we entered into a new partnership with Charles Darwin University to deliver education and training programs in prisons so that offenders can leave prison job ready, which we know will help to reduce the likelihood of reoffending. We also expanded men's behaviour change programs, including establishing a new program for the Big Rivers region. We also invested $45 million in delivering the Territory's first Aboriginal Justice Agreement. Madam Speaker, I'll remind those opposite in the government, the Chief Minister is a signatory to the Aboriginal Justice Agreement. The member for Barkly is a signatory to the Aboriginal Justice Agreement. He was the Shadow Attorney General, but obviously his 4 years of hard work paid him no dividends to then become the Attorney General. For some reason, the member for Brennan just won the lucky lotto to become the Attorney General on that side. It's obviously because of some reason that the member for Barkly was kept out of that very important role of being the first law officer. But I would love to see the member for Brennan, Madam Speaker, become a signatory to the Aboriginal Justice Agreement as the new CLP Attorney General. But the former Shadow Attorney General, the member for Barkly, is a signatory to that agreement. And the now Treasurer, the member for Namatjira, Bill Yan, is a signatory to the Aboriginal Justice Agreement. So the social and economic impact of when we can look at justice reinvestment, Madam Speaker, that is a story that the Treasurer can definitely drive in his new role, and I hope he does. I hope he doesn't just sit there quietly because they did the deal some time ago to keep the Chief Minister in the leadership role when they were in opposition. I hope that the Treasurer takes his responsibility as the Treasurer to really look at justice reinvestment, because that is what's going to make the long-term difference when we talk about community safety, Madam Speaker. Early intervention, early investment. Madam Speaker, the Aboriginal Justice Agreement included investment in local solutions such as law and justice groups, community courts to assist communities, reduce reoffending and to address local justice issues. Communities want to be part of the solution, Madam Speaker, and this comes to addressing crime and antisocial behaviour, whether it's in our urban areas, when it's in our regional areas, or indeed in our bush and remote areas of the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, some of our remote and regional parts of the Territory are desperate for the CLP government to come out, to sit down, to listen, to learn from them about what the programs and the actions they want to see drive the difference for safer communities in their parts of the Territory. Please, please make an opportunity in your busy schedules up here in Darwin to make sure you are coming to our remote communities and actually listening to those elders, listening, making sure that you are learning from them and acting on what they are asking you as the government. The 3 Ls, that's right, member for Barkly, I respect that. Look, listen and learn. Making sure that you have a full perspective of the whole of the Territory. Making sure that you are listening to remote Territorians in the solutions, the local-led solutions that they have suggested, that they are driving, that they have been working on for many, many years, continuing that good work. Please do that, CLP government. Madam Speaker, the CLP has promised that it will address the root causes of crime, but at this stage, its promise is without any substance. We strongly encourage the CLP government to continue to invest in those local-led community solutions that have been proven already, Madam Speaker, across the Territory to make communities safer because of local leadership and local law and justice groups leading the way. Otherwise, in 10, 15, 20 years, Madam Speaker, whoever's in this chamber at that time will be having the same conversation. Long-term solutions absolutely require early investment in education, housing, health, training, jobs. These are the key pillars across our communities that will lift people in the Northern Territory out of poverty, Madam Speaker, and therefore reducing crime in the Territory. Our former Labor government secured record funding in partnership with the Commonwealth for education and remote housing, and I urge the CLP government to continue to honour these important commitments in the Territory in full. We know that there are shocking rates of domestic and family violence across the Territory. This, by far, is some of the most shocking crime experienced across the community. And if we could only see the CLP government invest in the DV sector, the same way they've already done with home ownership scheme, this will put the Territory on a better track to have safer communities. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, the Chief Minister has outlined to us the rapid action that it's taken on our crime crisis. Let's talk about our crime crisis. In 2023, more than half the deaths by homicide were domestic violence related. 2 in 3 assaults were domestic violence related. More than 65% of people in our prisons are there for DV-related issues. More than 65% of our police time is spent on DV-related issues. More than 95% of the young people in detention are affected by DV. I ask again, where is the action on this? We hear this is a government of action. This government who spent no money on domestic, family and sexual violence since the election. There's money for new houses. There's money for swimming lessons. But there's money for locking people up, but there's no money for what we know will work to stop the deaths and harm to women and children in our community. It's impossible to understand how the Minister can say she needs time to act on this. Madam Speaker, it is manifestly untrue that there's no evaluation on the work that has been done, and it's manifestly untrue to say that there's no evaluation framework in place for the work in the future. We know there's a plan developed over years, developed by experts, frontline workers, police. I cannot understand how this government is saying it is taking action on crime when it is doing nothing to address the real crime crisis here in the Northern Territory. The crisis which costs us the most, takes up the most police time, takes up the most prison space, and takes the most lives and hurts the most people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.